Hey guys, I'm just getting on here recording. We have no intro, we have no conclusion, and this is an episode that I really just felt that I wanted to do, and I thought about it while I was at the gym today. And so before I give you some of my thoughts and give you a little background on it, you can go into the show notes. We still have guest passes available September 14th and 15th here in New Jersey. We will have our next live event. We have over 100 people registered. We have Kairos from all over the U.S. We have Canada. We have, I think, 30 something states represented. So there's still time to register. It is not too late. I know that you being in person is the most valuable thing that you can do. As I've said many times before, these events cost me a lot of money. I don't make money on these events. I literally do them because I know it's the best thing for us, our community, and the guests that have to just see it to believe it. I know that's the reason why we do it. So in the show notes, please click on the link for the application for the guest pass. So let's get right into it. So Friday, I flew home to New Jersey from Orlando, and I go to Orlando 4 times a year for my mastermind group, for my CEO mastermind group. My CEO mastermind group is quite unique. We are a group that has been together now for 5 years, and there's a core group of us who are now going to stay together going forward. So the reason why it's unique is because many times these type of groups last 3 years at the most, and then eventually they go separate ways and people get uninterested, bored, change directions, move in a different way. But as we move into our 5th year, through our 5th year, I've been able to be around a certain core group of people who I've watched them go from a couple 100,000 to now multiple millions. I've watched people hire, fire, train staff. I've watched people build families. I've watched divorces. I've watched so many things happen personally, and I've developed real, true, strong relationships with these people. And through all of that, I have so much wisdom now and insight to be able to share with all of you, all the listeners to our podcast. Now, what I would say to most of our listeners, many are quite young, air quotes, in practice. They are just getting going, or they've been doing it a year or two, and they're still trying to figure it all out. And while we're all still trying to figure it all out, I think that the lessons that I can share with you that now I've been in it for, a decade, so to speak, can be so helpful as you're building your business. One of the main takeaways as I come back from these CEO groups and people that have been doing it and have kind of gone through it is that the level of what's hard changes. The level of what's hard changes. My friend Kevin Vandy, I literally laugh at him now because the problems that used to be problems 5, 6, 7 years ago are now just part of the deal. And a very tactical example is Kevin has now opened up a second clinic, which is wildly successful, wildly successful. While he was negotiating the lease, he was supposed to open up out of a gym, and he was negotiating with this place. And one day we got on a call and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to have to find a new space. This gym just hasn't called me back in 3 weeks." He said, "I already have a lease in line and I have the contract and I'm ready to go." And then he just moved on with the conversation. And I just sort of paused him and stopped and laughed because 5, 6 years ago, that would have absolutely wrecked him or me. And when I work with my mastermind members who haven't gone through this thing before, who haven't gone through these different trials and tribulations, something like that would be all consuming. But as you grow in your business, you build callus. That 135 on the barbell is still 135, but it just doesn't feel as heavy. And I think for so many of us in our business, the stress that we feel, a lot of it is because it's new. A lot of it's because we haven't done it before. When we go to hire someone for the first time, it feels so stressful. There's so much pressure on it. But when you've done it a dozen times, it doesn't feel as challenging anymore. And so we all have these moments in our business. And I think the ones that make it are the ones that recognize this. There's just a matter of time and reps and effort that needs to go into something. Now, the interesting part about this is all of you guys understand this. Because if you've been in practice for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, at some point you look back and say, wow, I'm so much better than I used to be. And the main reason is because of the reps you've got. The reps you've got. And so why not translate this to our business relationships and our business acumen? So when you go to hire someone and you're nervous, it's like you should be nervous. You've never hired anyone before. When you go to raise your price, you should be nervous because you've never raised your price before. But if you stay in it long enough and you do it for a long enough period of time, it won't become nearly as nerve-wracking as it once was. The problem that most people have is they're not willing to do it long enough. It doesn't feel good in the moment and they're not committed to doing it, so they stop. Which brings me to my next point. The people in my CEO group who are now doing well into the seven figures and are now looking at different aspects of their business to invest and to scale and to grow, the word that comes back over and over is the word commitment. Is that even though early on it was hard and even though they felt uncomfortable, it's not that they didn't feel these things. That's that they didn't go through the same things that all of us go through. It's just that they were committed to the end goal, committed to the process, committing over and over and over again to seeing it through. Nobody in the right mind, if they have a short-term mindset and aren't committed, would be willing to invest the money in people, invest in the mastermind groups, invest in the travel, spend time away from family, unless you have that deep down level of commitment that you're going to see it through. And so the one characteristic and trait, if gun to my head and asked me, what do I believe is the one characteristic and trait that the most successful people in our industry have? It's that level of commitment to build the business, to not just be a practitioner. Think about yourself as a practitioner. You have one patient that doesn't get better. They come in with complex low back pain and they don't get the results. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably didn't quit being a rehab chiro. Why? Because you're committed to being a practitioner. It isn't that you're good or bad. It's that you have a commitment level that even when it doesn't go well, you are still committed to seeing it through. And so that trait, that characteristic, where in your life today are you not committed? And what do you need to commit to? I've had people that I've coached who grew their business, they hired an admin, the admin quit, they had some issue, and then they never hired anyone again. And the only thing that I can think about in that circumstance is that they weren't committed to actually building the business. Because as soon as one bad thing happens, they're out. One of the things, like if you get married to someone, most of the time, if you have one disagreement, you don't get divorced. Now, sometimes that happens, but realistically, you go through a lot with another person. And the reason you stick through it is because you've made a commitment. The same thing occurs in your business. You are going to have hardships. You are going to second guess yourself. You are going to have issues and problems in it. But if you have commitment to seeing it through, and you're just willing to do it and stick with it and work through the BS and invest the time and invest the money, you will be able to get through it. But I come back to that level of commitment required that so many people just are not willing to do. Many of us we get in it and we just don't want to do it long enough. The next thing, as I was referring back, and I shared this in our Slack channel when I came home, and it was a really profound lesson for me. So I've been in my CEO group now, like I said, for 5 years. And when I started in that group, I by far had the lowest of everything. I had the lowest revenue. I had the lowest amount of staff members. I had the lowest level of success. I had the lowest level of profit. And at this time, I'm proud to say now I've moved very much to the front in all of those categories. Now, what was interesting is we had a new member come into our CEO group this year, and he's been with us for 9 months. And so when people comment on my business, all this guy keeps hearing, oh man, the transformation you've made, it's been truly remarkable. I can't believe you're doing what you're doing. I didn't know when you started if you were going to be able to do it. And so we're going out to dinner on Thursday night, and he comes up to me and he goes, man, what's your deal? And I was like, what do you mean, what's my deal? He goes, every time I'm here, I look at your prep document, I see your numbers, I see what you've done, and you're absolutely crushing it. You're as successful or more successful than everyone here. But all I keep hearing is, man, the transformation you've made, I didn't know if you were going to be able to do it. Man, I look back to where you've come and how far you've progressed. He goes, I don't get it because I didn't see it. What the heck is the deal? And what I realized at that time is many of you guys listening to me on this podcast, all of the people in my mastermind group, none of you knew me then. You know, the first time I ever taught at Parker, when Josh Satterley was nice enough to allow me to step on stage, I started off my presentation when I first got doing this coaching thing, and I said, raise your hand if you've ever heard of me before. Like 2 people raised their hand. And I said, good, that was on purpose. The reason why no one ever heard of me until I had success is because I wasn't willing to share what I had done if I wasn't successful. Now, the problem with that is many of you listening to this podcast think that the level of success I had is so far out of reach because it's unrelatable. But what you have to understand is I understand what you guys are going through, the insecurities that you have, the second guessing that you have, if you made the right decision, if you should invest your money. I understand that. Why? Because guys, that was me. That was me for a really long time. And as I said, one of the reasons you don't know about that is because I wasn't teaching it back then, because it wouldn't be genuine to who I am. Because I had to figure it out myself before I could teach anybody else. And so if you're listening to this, I want you to understand and don't think that anyone, myself included, people that you might consider to know a little bit or be an expert in the subject, have always had it figured out. The reality of the situation is that I am the same as all of you, and I understand what you are going through. Because I've been there. I've been to the point where I didn't know if I was going to make payroll. I've been to the point where we had to close 2 months because of a pandemic. I've been through the point of not understanding if I could raise my price. I've been through the point of second guessing if I even made the right decision. I've been through the point of going to the airport and leaving family and new baby and all of that away alone and understanding, man, why am I doing all of this? Why am I doing all of this? And so don't think that I've always had it figured out. Don't think that I have it figured out now. This is what I wrote, a little bit of what I wrote, an excerpt in the Slack channel. I said, here's the key. I was dumb enough not to quit. I was humble enough to listen and ask. I was arrogant enough to know I could. I had enough self-worth to give myself a chance. I also understood I'm not that special. Many of you are in the thick of it right now. It doesn't get easier. You get better. Stick with it. Focus on developing your skills. Improve your character traits. Become the person you look up to. You've already done the thing you said would make you proud. You've already done the thing you said would make you proud. For everyone listening to this podcast, wherever you are, whether you just started your clinic, whether you're making 20K and want to get to 30, whether you hired your first employee, you've already done the thing you said would make you proud. I want you to stop and reflect on that. My friends, we are all on this journey together. Don't for 1 second think that the people in front of you have it all figured out. Don't for 1 second think that your situation is that special. Don't for 1 second think that you can't do it. Because as soon as you think that you can't, guess what? You're right. The path that you have chosen is very hard. It is very hard. You have decided to get your doctorate. You have then decided to come out as a rehab chiro and take a different approach and path to treating patients. You have listened to people that are experts in your industry tell you why it can't be done, and why it's too expensive, and why you shouldn't have to sell. But you know deep down in your soul that it's the right thing to do because of the level of care that you want to offer people. And then on top of that, you've decided that you want to be an entrepreneur, which statistically is less than 10% of the country. And so now you have a doctorate, you're practicing different than anyone around you, you've chosen a harder business model, and you start a business which less than 10% of the people do. Even if we just stop there, you are absolutely an extraordinary person. You are an extraordinary person. Beyond that, 4% of businesses get to over $1 million. And so now you're a doctor, you practice differently, you start a business, and for the ones that are successful enough to get to $1 million, you are just plain weird. And to be exceptional, you have to be an exception. You have to think different. You have to do different. You have to be different. And I hope when you listen to me talk, when you listen to this podcast, I hope that you understand how well you're doing and how far you can go. There's someone that needed to hear this today. There's someone that needed to hear this today. 135 on the bar, 135 bench press. It does not get lighter. You get stronger. think about your business the same way. And like I said before I go, there's no outro today. Just understand, if you're going through it right now and you're in the thick of it, we can help you. And if you're so inclined, go into those show notes, click on the link, and apply for a guest pass for our live event. I can't wait to see you there.